Are you getting caught up in the latest health trends and feeling overwhelmed as to what diet is best? We get it, and that's why, as leaders of wellness in our community, Joanne's Place Health Foods has created the Wellness on Purpose podcast. On this podcast, you can expect community and brand experts to share impactful, educational, and realistic information to help you progress on your journey to live wellness on purpose now and for future generations. My name is Marissa Laughlin. I'm a holistic nutritionist in partnership with Joanne's Place and your host for this podcast. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Wellness on Purpose podcast. On today's episode, we are welcoming back one of our favorite guests, Cyrus. Cyrus is a compounding pharmacist who tries to get people off drugs and onto a healthy and sustainable diet and lifestyle regime that includes key nutrients from one of Canada's top-selling supplement lines, which he has created, Pure Lab Vitamins. In past episodes, we've talked about cardiovascular disease in women, seasonal affective disorder, and the importance of an acid-alkaline balance. And we're going to continue the conversation today to discuss the top 3 rising health concerns that are specific to women. Before we get into it, join me in welcoming Cyrus back onto the podcast. Good morning. Hello, Cyrus. Welcome back to the Wellness on Purpose podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Spring is finally here, and thank you for having me on your show.
Yes, absolutely. So let's get right down to business. We are seeing a rise in common health concerns among women, and I believe that there's a common denominator to a lot of these concerns, which is why I've asked you to join us to talk about that on the podcast today. But before we get into how to support the ladies that are listening, I'd like to start by asking you what you think are the top 3 health concerns that women are facing today.
Yes, well, to begin, most of the clients that I'm connecting with are actually women, but many of them just inquire about their partner or other family members, and to a much lesser extent about themselves. You know, they just are the caregivers, and they oftentimes forget themselves, which is, I think, a big concern because they need to really be fit to provide care. Otherwise, it all goes the wrong way. But the many conversations I have with customers and clients via email or over the phone, I would say that the most common concerns for women are sleep or insomnia, certainly stress, and then obviously concerns around any kind of hormonal imbalances.
I too am seeing that amongst my clients as well as our customers come in store. And I'm so happy that you mentioned it's really important for women to take care of themselves because, as you said, it's kind of secondary, as soon as they're taking care of their kids or their significant other or a family member. But it's really important for women to make sure that their health is optimal so they can have the energy and motivation and strength to care for the rest of their family as well.
It's like in the plane, you're supposed to put the oxygen mask onto yourself first. And then help others. And that's, I think, the same idea counts for any kind of health approach. Take care of yourself first so that you have the strength and energy to take care of others.
So with these 3 top concerns among women, do you think that they're all related to each other? Meaning if one of them imbalanced, you may have the other ones also imbalanced, or are they just single concerns on their own?
It's a very good question. And these are all 3 of them that we touched are directly connected to each other. Insomnia would make you less able to cope with stress the next day, and stress will not make you sleep any better. So this is truly a vicious cycle. Hormone imbalances will also add to your stress levels, and stress will also imbalance hormones. That's proven and studied many times over. So here's another vicious cycle. And then finally, hormone imbalances will affect your sleep, which will make you more stressed the next day. So they're really all completely interconnected to each other. And the biggest factor here to address first is, from my point of view, stress.
There's so much studying being done on all different types of health concerns, and it does really boil down to the stress that we have externally as well as internally in our bodies, no matter what we're talking about. So I completely can see how that would be driving both insomnia as well as hormonal imbalances as well. So I want to break down each of these concerns and maybe give some suggestions to our listeners on how we can support them right now. So let's start at the root of all disease and health concerns concerns, as I just said, stress. We know stress is never not going to be present in our lives, whether it's financial, deadlines, work-related, pickup times for our children. There's just so many different areas in which our stress levels are impacted. So we need to talk about a stress management routine because, as I said, those stressors may never go away, but how can we really support ourselves, and what type of daily routines do you think women should be having to manage their stress?
Well, there's a lot of things we can do. We just got to really want to do them and then implement them into our lives. There is measures to reduce our stress levels. Exercise, and I mean daily exercise, is undoubtedly the best lifestyle recommendation. And daily, by the way, means actually every day, not just when we think today is the day. Also, recognizing your stressors and either removing them if possible or changing your attitude towards them is very important and very effective. If a job stresses you out day after day after day, you really got to think about whether this job is worth keeping or whether you should try, or at least try, to find a different kind of work that you might potentially enjoy. Which would take out a huge stress component. If certain people in your environment are stressing you out, then remove them if you can, or point out very strongly that, yeah, you are stressing me out. I don't want to be stressed out this way. So let's find ways to be less stressful with each other. Like addressing the issue and trying to make changes, very important and can be very effective. Reducing refined sugars and carbs and replacing them with good protein and good fat sources will also help reduce blood sugar fluctuations. And with that, you have a much more stable energy supply throughout the day. And with that, you also become much more stressable, stress-able. And if I had to pick only one supplement, even though I would be very torn between a good bioactive B complex, ideally in slow release form, and a good magnesium glycinate taken at least morning and bedtime, I think what we call nature's antidote to stress is the most important one to consider and try out, and that is L-theanine, also preferably in slow release formulation. And this can be used as needed during the day and also together with magnesium glycinate at bedtime.
Let's just recap really quickly there. In terms of stress support, I'm so grateful that you touched on each of those areas. I think exercise is something that, first of all, is free. Like, you don't need to have a gym membership. You don't need to have equipment. You could quite literally walk every single day at a quick pace and have daily exercise. So I think that's just a staple. At this point, everybody should be able to fit that in. I also really want to put an emphasis on the refined sugar and carbohydrates, because when we talk about stress so often, we look at a lot of the external factors, like our jobs, like our relationships. But when we think about other things that are happening that we're putting into our body, food can be a very big stressor for people, especially if there's a sensitivity, whether it is a food allergy. Those are all stressors on our body as well. So if we can really amp up our nutrition with that good quality protein, like you said, and fat sources, that will really help with the stress internally in our bodies as well. So I'm so happy you mentioned those. And then, yeah, I think, as you mentioned, like a B complex, magnesium, and L-theanine, and I'm sure they're going to relate to the other topics we're going to talk about today as well, but that's like the foundation I see a lot of people taking for stress management. So that's fantastic. Now, we know there's always different things that can impact our stress levels, which kind of leads us to the second most common health concern, at least I see in women, which is insomnia. So can you first explain what insomnia is and then how it impacts the rest of our body?
Insomnia is a term, but it's not really one defined condition. You could have a hard time falling asleep, or a hard time staying asleep, or any combination of these two things. And then there are, like, defined in the literature, we have three subtypes of insomnia. One is called acute insomnia, which is only short term. And then there's a term of transient insomnia, which is usually less than 1 week in duration. And then there is this actual condition called chronic insomnia, which is really a complex situation where your inner clock, your circadian rhythm is completely out of whack. Stress plays a huge role here. Inability to let repetitive thoughts go and being in a constant state of fight or flight with high cortisol levels throughout the night. These are factors that would lead into a more chronic issue.
Now, in terms of sleeping, I really want to know what you recommend in terms of how many hours we should be sleeping, because professionally, from my standpoint, and also the research I've done, it's usually 7, 8, sometimes 9 hours, depending on what your lifestyle is on a regular basis. But this is a conversation I have so often, and people tell me I thrive best between 5 and 6 hours of sleep. So professionally, what is your opinion?
Well, I think this is an individual finding. Not everybody is the same. And just like, for example, not everybody requires the same amount of vitamin D to reach proper blood levels. There is not one number of hours that is considered the best for the whole population. I certainly do very well on 8 hours of sleep, but I know I cannot generalize this. And there are many people out there that who jump out of bed after 6 hours and they feel rested and energized. No? I truly believe it depends on how you feel with the amount of sleep you're getting, and you kind of know what number of hours of sleep is good for you. Those affected by chronic insomnia, they can only dream of reaching a solid 6 hour sleep. Many people out there are dealing with like very, very interrupted sleep cycles throughout the night and can get, some of them barely get 2-3 hours in total of sleep throughout the night, which is crazy for them. Yeah, and there's measures to kind of improve such disturbed sleep cycles or circadian rhythms, but that requires a lot of daytime discipline and activities to kind of prepare for the nighttime routines. And there is some supplements that can help here as well.
Okay. Do you want to explain maybe a little bit more on what your recommendations would be for those people who need to improve their sleep quality?
Sure. So again, number one is exercise daily. And it's also, there were studies showing that you shouldn't have exercise too late at night. I always bring up the example of our hockey kids in Canada that sometimes have ice time fairly late in the evening, and they come back from that and they're completely mentally revved up, and it takes quite some time to kind of come down from that. So for anybody dealing with sleep issues or any kind of insomnia, exercise should not be done too late in the evening. Sleep is a factor to kind of reduce stress the next day. So you kind of, if you're aiming to improve your sleep habits and your overall sleep duration, you're kind of getting ready for the next day to cope with stress better, and you're slowly kind of fishing yourself backwards out of the vicious cycle. Then there are dietary recommendations, which would be to eat a lighter meal in the evening and specifically reduce sugars and carbs at dinner time. And there's one kind of consensus to not eat later than 8 p.m. and then stay up another 2-3 hours before you actually start your bedtime routine. As for supplements, I would always recommend magnesium glycinate, 2 or 3 capsules at bedtime. And for those that actually are affected by stress, and you know that if you're kind of, those people wake up in the early morning hours with busy brain, their brain seems to be awake before you actually open your eyes and is already revving at high speed with repetitive thoughts. For those, they could also use the L-theanine slow release 1 or 2 capsules together with the magnesium glycinate at bedtime. And that will downregulate your overnight stress response. It over time will help your system get used to that and produce lower levels of cortisol through the night. And with that, also lower levels of stress hormones, epinephrine, norepinephrine, then allows you to enter what we call the parasympathetic innervation, which is the type of mental state we should be in when we digest, when we receive food and nutrients, and also when we would like to get a good night's sleep. For somebody dealing with more chronic case of insomnia, with very interrupted sleep patterns, I think I would recommend higher doses of melatonin consistently for a full month, even if initial results of melatonin use are not fully satisfactory. Recommended dosages here are 9, 10, up to 15 milligrams at night. And when I say consistently for a full month, that means you kind of decide on the dose you want to pursue, and then take that dose every day for a full month at least. We make a very nice magnesium glycinate with 3 milligrams of melatonin per capsule. And you could, depending on the severity of your sleep condition, could use up to 5 capsules at bedtime, which would provide you with 50 milligrams of melatonin. And the idea here with this consistent use of melatonin, even if initial results are not fully satisfactory, is to practically retrain your inner clock back into a better and longer nighttime cycle. And if this helps you after a month or 6 weeks of continuous use to, for example, someone who previously slept for only 2-3 hours at night with interruptions, to then have 4 or 5 hours of uninterrupted sleep, that I would call a huge success. And if you then further include or proceed with your lifestyle changes, with your stress management, with your daily exercise, and potentially the dietary changes, I'm fairly confident that over time, you should be able to actually slowly increase your solid sleep cycle even more. One other thing to mention here, the timing of when to take melatonin is kind of important. To help somebody fall asleep, you would want to take the melatonin dose about 30 or 45 minutes before bedtime, so that you already have fully present melatonin blood levels by the time your head hits the pillow, and you're much more likely to slip into sleep then. And for somebody who has no trouble falling asleep but kind of wakes up intermittently or in the early morning hours, you would take the melatonin as late as possible, practically what I call at lights out, so that you fall asleep anyway. There's no trouble there, but you want to be sure to actually sleep through this potential midnight or early morning rising. So for that, you would take the melatonin right at bedtime.
Now, for someone who's dealing with stress and sleeping irregulations, it's okay for them to take the magnesium glycinate during the day and then supplement with the magnesium and melatonin in the evening, correct?
Correct. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Magnesium is actually, when it comes to stress-induced anxiety, one of the key calming nutrients that help us during the day. Magnesium taken during the day is not like taking a sleeping pill. It doesn't make you sleepy or drowsy at all. It just allows you to relax more. It's the body's relaxer of muscle and mind.
Now, as we connect the dots here, high stress levels can lead to sleep issues, and then both sleep and stress can lead to one of the most common health concerns in women, which is hormonal imbalances. So how are these 3 health concerns connected?
Yeah, they are connected, especially if you experience hormonal imbalances at much too young an age. Women, and also, by the way, men, go through hormonal changes. Average age of so-called perimenopause in women is onset of hormonal changes is age 40 to 44. That's the average. And menopause to at some point reach postmenopausal state can take years of hormonal ups and downs. And I believe that stress here is certainly a triggering factor.
So when someone is facing all 3 of these health concerns, where do they start? Do you start managing your stress first, or improving your sleep, or targeting hormones, or can you adjust all of these imbalances at once?
Theoretically, yes. But what we discussed before can be started at any time. And before you go into any kind of prescription measures, I would most certainly always recommend lifestyle, dietary, and supplemental measures to kind of balance those things out first, and then see if and if at all hormonal therapy is still necessary. But I mean, going through menopause can cause significant problems. There's also a number of supplements out there that are kind of targeting menopausal symptoms. They are usually herbal combinations which work for some. And if, depending on how they work and how you feel, you might at some point then start thinking about what we call HRT, or hormone replacement therapy. And there's different kinds of HRT. There's the one that mainstream medicine still frequently prescribes, which is a combination of synthetic estrogens and synthetic progesterones, taken orally in most cases. But me, as a compounding pharmacist for 25 years, I am more promoting the use of what we call bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, where we use like transdermal creams and usually start with progesterone on its own first before considering estrogens, because progesterone also has balancing effects back on your estrogen production and estrogen levels. If you're asking yourself, how would I go about that? The easiest way is to actually seek out a compounding pharmacy in your hometown, and kind of get recommendations which ones. And there's more and more in cities around Canada. They pop up like mushrooms. I would ask for the one that is most commonly working with HRT, and then ask the pharmacist there which practitioners are actually actively working on bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, and then try to get an appointment there. In Ontario and other provinces around Canada, naturopathic doctors have prescribing rights for progesterone and estrogen. At this point, not yet for testosterone, because testosterone is fairly easily abused, and for that reason, it is still a controlled drug and can only be prescribed by medical doctor.
So I think even though we talked about some hormonal imbalances for perimenopausal and menopausal women, for all of the ladies that are listening, I think a really good place to just start like looking at balancing your body out is look at managing your stress, having a good stress management routine in place, your daily exercise, proper nourishment, and then also focusing on sleep. Those are two big foundational things in every area of health that I think are really important to make sure you're prioritizing. And then hopefully you're also preventing any future imbalances in terms of hormones as well.
Yeah, and don't forget, nobody is born perfect. What we discuss here is truly a journey, and everybody has to kind of learn how to shift diet around. It's nothing that should start tomorrow at perfect execution, just like exercise. You can't expect to be completely like an exercise energizer bunny by tomorrow. No, it's a process, and don't stress out about these things either, but try and keep your focus on these key factors. And same with stress management. That is a strong and steep learning curve to figure out, okay, what can I do right now? What can I address right now? And what kind of changes can I make to help me on my path of better stress management? There is not a single simple treatment or self-aid group or so that you could join and then it's just all peachy and perfect. No, it's a journey for everyone. And I believe it's just important to kind of maintain your focus on really pursuing these changes, and then find ways that work for you to maintain these changes long term. If you put too much pressure on yourself, and then you're kind of almost doomed to fail. If you expect too much too quick. Get on the path, get on the bandwagon, and reduce stress. Look at diet, learn about diet, and incorporate exercise into your daily routines.
Absolutely. And like, as you said, it's so unique for everybody. And if you're trying to create a stress management routine, you don't want to create stress while trying to have that routine as well too.
And small steps, but continuous steps.
Absolutely. So on our Joanne's Place website, where these show notes will be for our listeners, I will leave a description of the supplement recommendations that Cyrus gave to us there. So you can look for those additional support for each of the concerns we talked about today. And ladies, if you haven't already, it's really time to start prioritizing your own wellness journey. Don't wait or dismiss whatever concerns you may be having. Pop into Joanne's Place today to talk to one of our supplement specialists about these supplements and recommendations, and we'd be happy to help you. And thanks again, Cyrus, so much for providing your recommendations for our community. And I look forward to chatting with you again.
Thank you for having me.
If you guys are still here, thank you so much for checking out today's episode. You know what to do now. Be sure to subscribe to our channels so you're notified as soon as a new episode is released. And also find us on social media and share that you are listening to the Wellness on Purpose podcast.